Hello, educators of Virginia. Welcome to another episode of Deeper Insights, your favorite podcast channel. I have the wonderful privilege today of sitting down with Emily Watkins, who is the Director of Community Impact for United Way locally in Richmond. Well, locally for me and close to me, but in Richmond. Emily, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm an avid podcast listener, so it's thrilling to be on kind of the other side of the microphone today.
Awesome, awesome. So our listeners have come accustomed to me not letting our guests get away with "I'm great, I'm doing
Yeah.
fine" when we check in. When I ask "How are you," I really want to know. Obviously, we're perfect strangers, and our listeners tuning in are looking to develop a relationship with you. So in this moment where we are in this time and space, how are you? And if you are great, why are you great?
Yeah. Well, I am someone who is kind of an optimist. I was once in an RPS classroom leading a volunteer activity, and the kid looked up at me and goes, "Are you always like this?" And I was like what?" He's, like happy. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty generally happy. But so I am kind of a happy person, but I'm working on a youth mental health initiative right now. And that's something that you definitely have to dig deep. All the things that you've been hearing about self-care for years, you need to practice in order to kind of stay positive, because I definitely deal with a lot of heavy stuff each day.
Yeah. That's it's so interesting that you say that because that's, we throw around that self-care and I think it's come to
Mhm.
a point where we're kind of saturated maybe with what that is and what that means, but really recharging. And I recently had a conversation with Jane Kesey who has bandwidth. Bandwidth is the word that she's using, and if you're going to support others, there's no way that you can do it if you yourself are not full and whole and ready to enter into that work. So it's so interesting that who you are just as a human being, like you talked about being positive and optimistic and happy and cheery, how that can have an influence on others, but it can also come back to you to take that away. So how you build that up. Um, that's definitely interesting. So, Emily, just a quick your journey.
Yeah.
Just kind of tell us, like, how did you get to the place where you are as a director of community impact?
Yeah. So I've worked at this United Way in a variety of roles over the past few years, and I was our senior director of strategic engagement. So I was working with all different community partners, trying to get them on board with different United Way initiatives. And one day I was at a meeting in Goochland schools and talking with the superintendent. What's the biggest issue you're facing right now? He said youth mental health. And then I went to a meeting, drove down to Petersburg, someone from the Petersburg Police Department said, "What's the biggest issue you're facing right now?" And it was youth mental health. And it was like, whoa, these are really different partners. And we had just been, schools had been closed, at least in our local area. A lot of them had been closed for over a full school year. And we heard so many alarming statistics. And it was like, how are we going to help our community right now? There's something really here around youth mental health. And so we got a grant from United Healthcare. Thank you, United Healthcare. If you're listening, we got a grant in order to bring a program here locally called Everyday Strong. And then I have my own kids, but also just hearing all these stories from talking, it was like, I want to do that. And so I switched my job. I applied to be the program director. And I don't actually have a mental health background, but I'm someone who the RPS student asks, "Why are you so happy all the time?" But I think there's something about convening people around mental health that really we convene other experts, people who've worked with youth, classroom teachers, all together. And so I really lean on their expertise, and I'm the one who can kind of keep us positive and going in this working on this project together.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely appreciate that. And I can definitely associate with, I'm not really qualified to do this
Yeah.
job, but I am on fire for this thing. And so I'm definitely willing to learn the skills that it takes. Even if I'm not the subject matter expert, maybe something that I'm really good at is bringing the subject matter experts together and for lack of a better phrase, herding the cats.
Yes.
So Emily, it sounds like this thing, this mental health crisis that we're in is maybe something that you're interested in, maybe something that you're passionate about. One of the questions I've been asking folks recently is, what are you thinking about? What keeps you up at night? Like right now in this moment, what's on your mind? So, but before we dive, I'd love to learn a little bit more about Everyday Strong. But before we do that, like what are you thinking about right now?
Definitely. What keeps me up at night? The first thing that came to mind was just my own kids, literally and emotionally keeping me up at night. I have a 9-month-old and a 4-year-old, but there are so many people who are just, you're in it with kids, especially some that may have mental health challenges, may have some developmental challenges. The parents, the caring adults, the teachers, the soccer coach, the people who are worried about a kid, you're in it with a kid. Thank you so much. Our kids need us. And there's nothing like youth mental health that can keep you up at night. I'm just like, and I would say beyond my own kids, it's the stories I've heard from other kids and families leading this initiative. So working with both people in schools and other professionals, but people who are just the grandma supporting their child and hearing stories about, what it looks like when mom's gone, dad's a drug user, the child's been suspended several times, and you don't know what's the first step I can take
Mm.
to help support this child. And so all those grandparents and parents and teachers being like, what's that first step? So I'd say it's those folks I think about when I'm trying to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so interesting, especially when you're really talking about how many kids we serve who have a story. The metaphor of the invisible backpack. Like the kids show up at our doorstep. If we're parents when they come home from somewhere, or if we're educators when the kids get off the bus and they walk into the school, or if we're an out of school time provider and they walk into our facility, or grandma's got to cover down on uh, you know childcare duties from 4 to 6 or whatever. Every kid has their own story, and right now the stories are I don't know if they're heavier than they've ever been in the history of mankind, or what, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of work to do. One thing that we know is 38% of Virginia teens reported feeling sad or hopeless for 2 weeks or more within the last year. And that 2 weeks or more is an important threshold because that's one part of the definition of depression. And so we're looking at 38% of our kids are reporting the main symptom of depression. That's huge. And we know some things that had the pandemic had a role in that. But if you look at what 2019 was, it was 32%, and 2015 was 27%. So things have been getting worse before and after the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of reasons why people say that. It's not going to be the same. There's a lot of things we can point to, but even if we don't know exactly what the reason or the cause is, we have some known solutions that we know will help individual kids and our communities as a whole.
Yeah, so we
That's the
definitely
good
want
news.
to we definitely want to unpack some of those
Yeah,
solutions.
as I said, I'm an optimist, so I had to end with some good news.
No, I think now, it's so important to have hope, to have that layer of optimism, that layer of promise of what it is that we're looking forward to, but then also that solutions oriented mindset, because it would be very easy for us to just say it's hard and wallow in it and just like spiral and not move forward. But definitely. So speaking of solutions, you mentioned earlier Everyday Strong. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the program. So tell us a little bit about it, how it came to be, what the program serves, et cetera, et cetera. Tell us all the things.
Yes, great. So it's really based off of the growing body of evidence that shows that the number one thing that's going to help kids bounce back from setbacks and challenges is the presence of a caring adult, at least one committed, stable relationship with an adult, someone they can talk to about their problems. So the good news is that's a known evidence-based solution. The hard part of that is how do you be that adult, right? Like, even if you want to be supporting your, you're a student in your classroom, 14-year-olds are not really the hardest to, or not necessarily always the easiest to connect with and support with. And so what we wanted to do was provide tools and trainings and solutions to people to help be that caring adult. What are the things that adults can do to help be that person to build the resilience in kids?
Yeah,
Um, Go ahead.
yeah, no, you go ahead. You keep going.
So we started here locally. Another United Way got started with this, and they had great results of the number of people who are reporting taking positive interactions with teens to support their mental health. And so one thing is we knew we wanted to move quickly, that really we're in a crisis coming out of the pandemic. We didn't want to spend 10 years developing something. So we leaned on something that was developed by another United Way and adapted it here locally with a working group of educators, of people who worked at the health department, people who work for SCAN is one of our main partners, which stands for Stop Child Abuse Now, and all the people who have the right initials after their name. I'm the one who convenes us all. And to adapt it here locally and work on launching both a public awareness campaign and community trainings and school trainings for educators and people to help support the emotional needs of teens.
Yeah. Yeah, you were talking about, you know, um, supporting the adults. I want to talk, if it's okay with you, talk a little bit about that because
Yeah.
what I'm finding is like we're struggling too.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so earlier you talked about how it's important to be able to show up for your whole self in your work. But I want to get into like I think there's a disposition side of it, like having that mindset, but then there's also a set of skills. Like I want to be the best dad in the world to my kids, but parenting is hard. Like, you know what I mean? So when you talk about like how to adult in a way in support of a child, especially right now, what are some things that you're thinking about or that you're talking about or kind of coach us through some of that?
Yeah, so it's very simple on purpose. And we break it down to three things. One for the three emotional needs of children, and really these are all of our emotional needs, but we focus on examples of kids 8 to 18. Just it's going to show up differently in early childhood or later in life, but we break down the emotional needs to emotional safety, connection, and confidence. And so what are some things you can do to build emotional safety with a child, bringing like, how can I make them feel safe? That security, that routine, safe to feel all of their emotions, safe to fail, safe to talk. How do I be that safe place for a child or teen? From there, connection. How do we connect? And then ultimately, how do you support them? How do you help them build their confidence so that ultimately they can have mental wellness, thrive, however you want to kind of resilience, however you want to put it at the top. But one thing we know is that if your emotional needs aren't met, if you show you are not going to be well positioned to help meet the emotional needs of kids. And the first one is emotional safety. So if you're a parent who, if the kid doesn't know how mom's going to show up each day, is she going
Mm.
to fly off the handle, or if there's not shared expectations for the child's behavior and yours, that's going to not create a sense of emotional safety. And that goes for people inside the classroom too. Having a sense of that stability routine is really kind of the first step. Having an emotionally stable adult is usually that kind of first step towards emotional safety for kids.
Yeah. That's gosh, you're hitting home on a whole lot of levels right there.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like, I can't help but think like how much training at, like, for instance, on the professional side as educators, the amount of training we go through, degrees, certifications, experience over time, trying things that work and don't work, and and I struggle, this is just me, I struggle with, my goodness, like I know exactly what I need to do as a teacher. I know exactly what it is that I need to do as a school leader. I know exactly what it is that I need to do. Well, not always as an executive. I'm not going to say that I know what I'm doing, but I know exactly what I should be doing.
Yeah.
As a parent, that's not always easy. Like when you're talking about that support, and when we extend beyond parenting, as teachers, for the safety, connection, and the confidence, as out of school time providers with that safety, connection, and confidence. I really like that safety, connection, and confidence, by the way. It just sounds like being that simple, recognizing that it is that complex, can really give us some Velcro really to stick onto and to come back to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think parents, we have to make it easy, right? Because you have a million things going on. But also for educators, we didn't want this to be one more program, one more thing that you have to submit reports on, but more just a set of tools, really a mindset that you can bring to the classroom of how can I help a child feel safe, connected, and confident. And how the best part about it is that it is so simple, but that also we all have experience in those things. We all have experience in how when we felt safe or when we didn't. And we all have, there's such a diversity of experience that one thing that might speak to me might not speak to another kid or might not speak to another person. So we all have kind of valid and diverse life experience in these things. That I think helps make it really universal and a tool that people can use.
Yeah. So can you talk us through, I mean, the majority of our audience is educators. Some of our educators are also these other things too, like parents and coaches and out of school time providers. So we definitely wear many hats as human beings these days. But really specifically what, VASCD's mission is, and really looking to advance excellence in Virginia's classrooms, and really thinking about a kid's experience and how a teacher or how a school leader works with that. How do some of those things specifically show up in schools, and what are either some next steps or some first steps that educators can take when really looking through this lens of student mental health, but specifically through Everyday Strong?
Yeah. So I would say the first step is really just it's a mindset shift of looking at the emotional needs of kids and how can you help build those things. And so we do have a 1 hour training. We have them online, we have them in person within the Richmond area, and we also have partners. So CIS of Virginia is a partner. Our local health department is a partner, and so you can get it at other places as well, other than just United Way. But on our website, everydaystrongva.org, you can find trainings, you can find materials there. But I would say that it's not, again, it's not a program they have to do. It's really tools to help them think through how can I create safety, connection, and confidence in some of those concrete examples. And they're going to be different. So one example under connection is I was working with one if I could just share an example from my
Yeah,
own life,
please do. Please do.
someone who I had a volleyball coach, and the man would always just say, good hustle, Watkins, good hustle." And so presumably, if you were like doing volleyball really well, you're getting good hustle a lot, But we got no other feedback, which maybe that's helpful for developing volleyball players, probably not. But if you're thinking about something that would help support youth mental health, we know that specific praise will go a lot further than generic praise. So something like, can you find something of someone on your volleyball team and say a compliment, something specific, notice something about her that you could say only to her, that you could say to no other student on the team. Notice that, praise that, and that teen can say, I was seen, and he sees that I'm different, and that's okay with him. So something like that's a really small tip of how you can create emotional safety, of safe to be different. And so it's really, really simple kind of switches like that. Or I would say my own another story from my life. I had a science teacher who I started skipping school a little bit. I had already gotten into college. And so I kind of, wasn't giving chemistry my full attention. And it was actually my bio teacher from the year before was like, hey, where are you going? And she kind of asked in a way that just like expressed really genuine curiosity. And underneath it, I was skipping school because I had already gotten to college, but I'm from Los Angeles. I was going to college in Boston. And so that's a big change in someone's life. And like the anxiety of leaving all my friends behind, my boyfriend behind, who like I can hardly remember his name, but at the time it was so important, and like really having a lot of anxiety about that transition. Teens don't show up and say, I'm having a lot of anxiety about going to Boston next year,
Well,
um,
well, they do now.
oh yeah.
They can very much identify it in 2023.
Good point. There might be more emotionally literate than I was at that age, but for me, it was skipping school. But having a science teacher just goes, where are you going? Oh, tell me about this boyfriend, like just asking questions. So one example is just express genuine curiosity about them is a way to build connection. And so these are really simple things, simple tips that you can do. And again, a tip that worked for me might not work for someone else, but we all have lived experience that once we kind of make that mindset shift, we have things that we can kind of tap into to help build that safety, connection, confidence with kids.
Yeah, I'll be sure to put the everydaystrongva.org website link in the notes so that folks have that easy access to it. I
Yeah.
definitely appreciate that. Um, so Emily, we promised to keep it under 30 minutes, and we're coming up close to that 30 minutes. Are there any other points or tips or even examples that you want to share before we say goodbye to this episode?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that you can make the difference. If you're the volleyball coach, if you're the math teacher, if you're someone who's an administrator who just says to the kid who's chronically absent, when you see him next, say, "Oh, hey, I'm so glad you're here today." Some of those simple things, you can make the difference. And so I think we're all can get kind of burnout, overloaded. To your point, like there's so many demands on educators these days, and the problems seem so huge. But luckily, the solution is also very simple of that kind of genuine connection with kids. So I would just leave it with that, you can make the difference.
Yeah, and if we all took that challenge, especially when we think about the village that is helping to raise each child, if it's one person rowing that boat, we might not be able to really move. We can make some dents, but it might not be able to move. But if everyone takes that on, who that child interacts with, and all of the adults are rowing that same boat and taking that same approach, then we are going to be all right.
Yeah. And I would also just say thank you so much for having me on today. Like I said, we've worked with a lot of educators, and you were definitely one of the organizations that they surfaced, and they're like, reach out to them. And then I saw that you had a podcast, and I love podcasts. So I thought, so this was a great fit, but it came highly recommended of people being like, this is a source we trust. So thank you so much for all the work that you do and having me on.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks.